So I think it's fair to say that everyone wants to experience the Walt Disney World theme parks when it's less crowded and when wait times are the lowest. But what if you're one of the many families who can't visit during the specific time of year when it's just less crowded, an off season, for example, or if you're staying off property and won't have access to early theme park entry? Are there any options available for you? Do you just have to deal with the crowds? That's exactly what we're talking about today. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel and welcome to Epcot, where today we're talking about 5 easy things that anyone can do any time of year, no matter if you're staying on property or off property, to avoid crowds here at Walt Disney World. Of course, we're doing it from one of my favorite spots, the benches just inside the entrance of the park. I've got this great view of just Spaceship Earth and the beautiful trees. They're all pink and lovely this time of year. I mean, what better place to kick off our day and chat a little bit about how to avoid the crowds. Now look, discussions about avoiding crowds can always be a little tough because generally speaking, people tend to lean towards visiting during certain times of the year, which isn't always possible for all families. And the same can be said for staying on property. Now, staying on property at a Walt Disney World Resort hotel means you have access to something called early theme park entry. I know it's not a very fancy name, but it basically means that you have access into the parks 30 minutes prior to day guests. And it might not seem like a lot, but it honestly is a great way to get a head start on your day, and something I definitely think you should take advantage of if you happen to be staying at a Walt Disney World Resort hotel. Now, some of the resorts here at Walt Disney World in the deluxe category, these are the most expensive hotels here on property, also have access to something called extended evening hours. Now, this isn't gonna be every day, it's gonna be at select parks on select days, so not everyone's gonna be able to take advantage of this, but if you happen to be staying at the right resort at the right time, this can be another option for experiencing the parks with less crowds. But again, not everyone's staying at a deluxe resort, not everyone is gonna be here on those very specific days. So what options are available to you, and are there any options available to you? Yes. And like I said, we're talking about 5 of them today. Now, number 1 on our list is so easy, it's almost painful, and that is to arrive early. Even if you don't have access to early theme park entry, maybe you're staying off property, you're staying with a friend, arriving early makes all the difference when starting your Disney day. And I can hear the naysayers out there. All of you who are like, I don't want to start my day early. I want a nice, relaxing vacation. Let me make myself perfectly clear. There's absolutely nothing wrong with having a relaxing, chill vacation. But if you're looking to beat the crowds, this is one of the many ways to do that. Now look, I didn't just lead with this all willy-nilly. No, the reason I'm sharing this right at the beginning of our discussion today is because I find it to be the most consistent at getting you the results you're looking for, which of course in this case is less crowds and lower wait times. And yes, this is a tried and true tip. Almost every single time I visit the parks, this is how I do it, especially if I want to knock out a bunch of attractions. But going this route, arriving early, also has some other unintended but super positive consequences. For example, if you're staying off property, you're going to be driving in. This is a great way to get fantastic parking. Honestly, it's like one of my favorite reasons to arrive early, because there is no cherry on the top of your Disney day, especially when you're driving in, like not having to walk that far to get back to your car. Like, seriously, it's the best thing ever. Also, the earlier you're here, the cooler it's going to be, even during the really hot times of year. And yes, sometimes you're going to get here and you're going to be dripping first thing in the morning. You see me in that situation all the time, but it is going to get hotter throughout the day. So if heat is a concern, this is a good way to squeeze out some extra time before it gets super duper toasty, and that can ultimately make your vacation a little bit better. And all of this, including being a little bit cooler out and having less people around, means that you can do things like really wander and explore. You can go shopping with a little bit more ease. Take all of those great family photos before you start to really, melt, and do it with less people around. So aside from avoiding those crowds and getting on some attractions with lower wait times, there are a lot of other great reasons to get here early too. Now next up, the flip side of that coin, that is arriving early, and that is to stay at the parks late, to close the parks out. Now look, staying in the parks late is not going to be as effective as arriving early, but it'll still get the job done. Though there are a few things that you need to keep in mind, but we'll get to that here in a second. First, let's talk about how to make this work best for you and your family. Now, I find that this is the most effective in the last 2 to 3 hours of the park day. With everyone trying to make their way out, some people have tapped out much earlier in the day. It's not uncommon to see wait times go down and for crowds to thin out a little bit. Though, just because it's less crowded in the park doesn't mean that you're not going to experience crowds, and that's definitely something you need need to keep in mind when you're going this route and staying late versus arriving early. Long story short, staying in the park late means everyone's going to be leaving at the same time, and it can be a mad dash, not only out of the park and back to the parking lot, which you can really feel over at Magic Kingdom, which can be a nightmare to get back to the TTC, especially for those of you who are driving, taking a ride share, staying off property and using their bus transportation. But it can also mean sitting in a significant amount of traffic, sometimes just to get out of the parking lots, sometimes once you make your way back onto the roads again. So that's something you have to think about and decide whether or not the juice of arriving late and staying late is worth the squeeze for you and your family. Now, just like arriving early, closing the parks out does have some positive unintended consequences. For example, during some times of the year at some parks, if you close things out, the sun has gone down. That means things cool off a little bit. And then there's the whole vibe that is Disney parks at night. There's just something about the lights and the energy in the park. And I really love that. I really enjoy just being in the parks, let alone having less crowds as well as shorter wait times. Now, as a little bit of a bonus tip, I really enjoy putting those first two suggestions together. I like arriving early, leaving midday during the hottest, most crowded part of the day, and then coming back in the evening. That's my idea of a great Disney day. And it's incredibly effective at avoiding crowds and experiencing low wait times, no matter what time of year you're here, and without having to pay the extra for that lightning lane. All right, now I know I'm gonna lose some of you with this next tip, but doesn't make it any less true. Skip those must-do rope drop attractions when everyone's suggesting you should go for them. See, I told you this was gonna be one that was gonna have some of you shaking your head and wagging your finger. Look, everyone wants to experience Walt Disney World's most popular attractions. And just like you, I mean, why else would you be hanging out with me here today? You want to do it with the shortest wait possible and without having to pay extra for that lightning lane single pass or whatever else. That has a lot of people recommending that you should make a beeline for these major attractions first thing in the morning. But here's the thing, that's not always the best call. In fact, more often than not, it's a terrible idea. Unless you're one of the first people in the park, right at the front of that line for early theme park entry rope drop, chances are you're going to be experiencing higher wait times and more crowds at those major attractions first thing in the morning because everyone has the same idea as you do. A better idea is to skip out on those attractions and experience other attractions with much less wait time, and then return back to that attraction a little bit later. In fact, it's not uncommon to see these really popular attractions have a high wait time first thing in the morning and then dip an hour or two later. It still might be quite the wait, fair enough, but at least that rush has fizzled out a little bit. Keep in mind, attraction wait times ebb and flow throughout the day, and we even have a wait time forecast in the My Disney Experience app. So take a second, open up your My Disney Experience app and look at the forecast for that attraction that you are thinking about rope dropping. Also, you don't have to do this while you're here at Walt Disney World. You can do this at home. That'll give you an idea of what to expect and ultimately come up with a game plan. And I'm telling you, you might be surprised just how much time you save. Now, our next tip is centered around food, and all of you eat when you're in the parks, right? Whether you're bringing your own food or whether you're eating at a table service, quick service, just a little kiosk. If you're eating at the parks, you need to know this, and that is the best way to avoid crowds and have a better overall experience when you're dining is to do it during off times. In other words, eat whatever you're eating early or opt to eat late. I know it's not far off from some of our previous tips, right? But it still has such a major impact on your day and can really make all the difference, especially if you're wanting your dining experience, again, whether we're talking table service, quick service, or just eating a sandwich on a bench, to be a positive and relaxing one. Of course, we all want to eat when we're hungry, right? Of course we do. That's one of the reasons I always pack snacks with me, and I recommend that you do the same. So you have something to snack on to hold you over until you can get to your next meal. But if you're willing to be flexible with when you eat that meal, it, like I said, will make all the difference in the way that you experience it. A late breakfast or early lunch can mean a lot more space in dining locations, especially over at table service restaurants, but the same can also be said for quick service. At quick service is actually even a better way to go because more often than not, quick service locations don't monitor who sits at tables or for how long. So it's not uncommon for you to grab a tray of food and have nowhere to sit, especially during certain times of the year. This can all be avoided if if you opt to eat a little early or opt to eat a little bit late. And the same also applies if you're bringing your own food, which we do all the time too. Everyone wants to find a quiet, out of the way space to eat and fuel up for the rest of their day. So if you can do that a little bit early or a little bit late, you're probably gonna have some more space available to you. And I'm talking about benches or tables or whatever the case may be. Generally speaking, for me, especially if I want to try and eat indoors in an air-conditioned space, that usually means grabbing lunch around 10:30, 11 o'clock, depending on where I'm getting my food and what time they open. But eating lunch around 2 o'clock is also a good way to go. 4 o'clock dinner can also be another great option, as can like a dinner at 8 or 9 o'clock. So it depends on what is going to work best for you and your family, but that's something to keep in mind. It's something to potentially plan into your day. This can also work out really nicely if you want to get a dining reservation at a hard to get place. Try and get that reservation during off times. Look, everyone wants to eat lunch at noon and dinner at 6. So try and work your day around that if you want to have a better, more chill experience. All right, we finally made our way back to the front of the park. And that means it's time for our final piece of advice. Have a plan. Now, I know that some of you are going to be really intimidated by this right out the gate because you're thinking, oh my goodness, plans meet spreadsheets. I need to have a whole strategy. No, I'm not suggesting that. What I'm suggesting is that you have an idea of what you want to do and a direction you want to go. You would be amazed how many people waste so much time just standing in one spot trying to figure out if we're going to go left or right. Once you've arrived at the park, having an idea of the direction you want to go and what your must-dos are, that's going to make all the difference, and it's going to put you ahead of a significant crowd. So before you even make your way here to Walt Disney World, which, you know what, you don't even have to do this that far in advance. You can do it the night before you make your way to the park. Think about what it is you'd like to do or the route that you'd like to take. Of course, you can always build upon this plan, but having the basics figured out, that honestly will make all the difference. But there it is, 5 things that anyone can do, no matter where they're staying, at any time of year, for no extra cost, in order to experience lower crowds and wait times at the parks. Consider arriving early. Consider staying late. Avoid those rope drop attractions. Zig when people zag. Eat during off times and come up with a plan. That's 5 relatively easy things that anyone can do. And yes, I know it might seem a little intimidating, but you've got this. Of course, I want to know some of your best tips and tricks for avoiding crowds and experiencing shorter wait times here at Walt Disney World. So tell me about them in a comment down below. Also, if you've ever done any of these things, tell me what your experience has been. How did you make early entry or eating during off times work for you and your family? We'd all love to hear what you have to say, so don't hold back. But for now, I think I'm off. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today at Epcot, and I look forward to seeing you guys next time. Until then, bye.